Joining us now, actor Gary Sinise. You will remember him most famously as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. But you may not know is that for decades now, Gary has been a tireless advocate for America's veterans, and he is serving this weekend as the honorary Grand Marshal of the National Memorial Day Parade. You've done this now for several years.
Yeah, the parade this will be, I think, 10th year in a row. And then there's the National Memorial Day concert, which is tonight. And
you'll be performing with the Lieutenant Dan Band.
No, not the band. It's
yeah?
I'm a co-host with Joe Mantegna. It's a wonderful, wonderful event.
So how did that role change your life, Lieutenant Dan?
Well, I had been actively involved with veterans groups going back to the late 70s and early 80s, Vietnam veterans particularly, because I have them in my family. And then in the 90s, I had the opportunity to audition for that part. I got the role, and that led me to working with our wounded through the Disabled American Veterans Organization.
Because you established a connection with these guys. I mean, you've been working on this issue, but now you became...
Well, yes. At that time, I didn't know until after September 11th, though, when we had this new generation of Lieutenant Dans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, that role would continue to play a part in my life. I started walking into the hospitals, and the young soldiers and Marines would look at me, and they'd be in the hospital bed, and they would recognize me from the movie, and it would open up a conversation, and I'd be able to talk to them about the story of Lieutenant Dan, which is a resilient story. He's okay in the end, and that's what we want for all our wounded coming back from war.
So we have a situation now where less than 0.5% of the U.S. population is active duty military. How do you... Are you worried that we lose a connection between those that are serving, sacrificing for our country, when so few are actually in that?
Well, unfortunately, there is a disconnection. But unless you have a personal connection to someone who's a friend or a family member or something like that, you might be very disassociated with what our military does. But on the other hand, if you look back to the Vietnam era, when people really disconnected with the military,
yeah,
and turned our back on our Vietnam veterans, a shameful period in our history. If you look in retrospect from then to now, it's much, much better. But we can always do more. I always say we can never do enough for our veterans. We can always try to do more. That's what we're doing at my foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation. We spread our wings across the country, helping our wounded, helping our Gold Star families, trying to address the needs of those who have served and are currently serving, our first responders. I think if every community in this country, every neighborhood, every town, every city reached out to the local veterans that are within those communities and extended a hand and tried to fill some needs, we would have much less, we'd have a lesser problem with regards to how we're treating our veterans. We can't expect the government to do everything. They should always try to do more.
How our government's doing?
Well, there's always the issues. There's always the bureaucracy and the issues, and we hear a lot about that. And thankfully, there are a lot of non-government organizations, foundations like mine and many other good ones that are out there. Bob Woodruff's Foundation, a lot of great non-government organizations that have stepped up to try to fill the gaps.
All right. Well, thank you for doing it. Gary Sinise, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.